One global risk this year is misinformation and disinformation in an election campaign season caused by generative artificial intelligence. What are top tech companies doing to deal with this massive challenge, especially at a time when 60 countries worldwide go to the polls, including India? To talk about this, we're joined at the Microsoft Lounge here at the World Economic Forum at Davos by the Vice Chair and President of Microsoft, Brad Smith. Thank you very much for joining us. And I am joined in this conversation by Kali Puri, Executive Editor-in-Chief of the India Today Group.
Thank you.
There is no one else who we've requested for an interview 4 times in 1 year. You are the only person. One of the reasons that's happening is because of the speed at which everything to do with artificial intelligence keeps changing, or at least the questions and concerns keep changing. So I want to start, Brad, this conversation by asking you about elections, misinformation, disinformation being the #1 concern, and understanding from your lens, what is Microsoft doing to try and stop that?
I think as a tech sector and really in alliance with the democratic governments of the world, with civil society, the time has come for us to recognize we need to do more. We need to take urgent steps. And I hope and believe that we may be able to do precisely that over the next month or so. I think fundamentally we need to do 3 things. First, we need to band together and persuade every company, every candidate, every government, every nonprofit that uses AI to create an image, an audio, or a video to label it so that people who hear it or see it know that it's AI. The technology has been developed, the standards are there, the watermarking is available. Now we have to commit to use it. The second thing we need to do is bring our industry together, including in coordinated ways, so that if there are deep fakes that are created, that fake or alter what a candidate is saying or doing in a way that's designed to deceive the public, that we know what we're going to do when that happens. And I think what we need to do is detect it, share that information, and have the major platforms, including our own, like LinkedIn, decide that we will take prompt action either to relabel it so it's clear that it has been altered, or remove it and people can make their own decisions.
And you have a tech solution to this. You can now tell whether or not it is a deep fake, just because from what we know on the outside, there isn't any foolproof way of knowing for sure that something is indeed a deep fake.
We have the computational capacity in our data centers, and we have the data scientists that together can move quickly so that if a candidate says that she or he, for example, has been the victim of a deep fake, they can get to work very quickly and come to a judgment.
How long will it take?
I will say less than an hour. In almost every case.
This is a tech solution or a human solution?
It's both. And that is one thing to keep in mind. The best AI usage usually involves using AI to make people smarter and make human judgments.
What's the third?
The third is we need to work together to help educate the public so that we have a well-informed, savvy public that is prepared for the possibility that it may see things that are not true. And when we look at what happened in Taiwan just last week, there was an election, there were deep fakes, but our sense from our team there is that the public was well prepared. And so even when there were deep fakes, they didn't succeed.
Taiwan is a very digitally literate society, small country, Africa, India, much bigger countries, lower levels of literacy, and in any case we've seen literacy doesn't really have any bearing on the ability to believe a fake if it's catering to your echo chamber.
And that's why we need to get to work. We need to do this in 70 countries in 1 year. We need to move quickly. We need to raise our ambition level. And I believe we have the opportunity to do that.
Can I go back to your measure 1, where you said that you want to encourage society, citizens, governments to label the content if it's synthetic? Why can it not be automatic? Why are we leaving it to their choice to do it? Because bad actors are the guys who are not going to really do it voluntarily, right?
Well, you're right about the latter. The reason that we can't do it automatically is because there's different tools on the market today. Some label it automatically. Some don't have the functionality or features to label it. And I think we have to move quickly to encourage every software developer that is creating these kinds of tools to build in that feature and functionality. But until that happens, it will be companies, it will be political candidates, it will be celebrities, it will be others that need to, I think, say, we're going to do that, and they'll send a demand signal to the market. And I think as they do that, the market will move much more aggressively and broadly to provide those features. And when those features are there, then maybe we can get to the point where we just decide everyone should, or maybe even must, under the law, label these things.
So I want to go to measure 2, because you said that it's going to be a solution which is AI and human. We are going into elections in India in a couple of months, and that's going to be 940 million voters, much bigger than Taiwan, right? Do you have the skill and the wherewithal and the expertise to deal with that kind of electorate? Or will you be able to deal with the misinformation that could come in an election that big?
I think it's important for the tech sector in collaboration with others, to do everything we can. You know, whether we can do everything that one might do 2 years from now, let's assume that that is not possible. But let's not make the perfect the enemy of the good. If the survival, the health of our democracies is at stake, then let's do everything we can as fast as we can to rally ourselves to work together, and let's make it effective, and then we'll just have to keep learning as we go.
It sounds as if you have a lot of stuff going on, which you are not at liberty to say right now. Can I assume that there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes for AI to deal with AI on misinformation?
I think that's a fair assumption, and it's interesting because the way you started this conversation is by saying the number one risk that everyone around the world is worrying about is really this issue around misinformation, disinformation in elections. I think that's a fair statement. And I think we started this year with people talking about the problem but not taking real steps forward. Now is the time. If not now, then when?
But I'm not convinced what you're saying is actually going to work, and I'll tell you why. Let's assume that you're asking people to put disclosures themselves. Now, if I'm looking to create trouble, I'm not interested in putting a disclosure. I want this to viral on WhatsApp and wherever else, just the day before polling. By the time it cuts to your office, not your office in particular, but when it gets to Microsoft, the damage is already done.
That's why it takes 3 steps to come together. To educate people so they're more aware, to advocate for labeling, and in this middle, to take action when these deepfakes are created, when they're disseminated with the intent to deceive the public. You need all 3 of these pieces. And even then, any engineer will tell you, oh, there's some problem that this won't solve. If you wait until you can solve every problem, you're probably going to be waiting for somebody else's lifetime. So let's get going. Let's solve the problems we can solve now, and then we'll get better, we'll get smarter, we'll build a new muscle. Let's recognize that this may be the most important year we've ever had for elections in the world's democracies, but there's still next year too. And so let's build this for a sustainable, stronger future.
So we hear this a lot, and since AI came into the narrative, we are hearing everyone wants responsible, safe AI. And every big tech company is taking steps to do that. But one of the things we also hear is we need scale to solve the problem, which kind of seems like a paradox, right? Because we're making it bigger to solve the problem that already exists. We're not taking a pause like some of the godfathers of AI said in the open letter, including Stuart Russell and Elon Musk. What do you have to say to that?
Well, I've never been a believer that you could get technology development to slow down. I've been a believer that you need responsibility, including through new laws, to speed up. And that is happening. I would step back and say 2 things are happening. Things are going faster, but not just by getting bigger. We have large language models, and now we have small language models. We have proprietary models, and we have open source models. We have a broad diversity. But even perhaps more interesting than that, the pace of responsibility, I might say, is speeding up. We're seeing more governments act. We're seeing Europe obviously act, the United States, the UK. I think this is a year where global governance needs to grow. And I think a lot of the fundamental pillars were created in 2023, principles around safety and security and the protection of people's rights. I think 2024 needs to be about three things: solidifying those pillars. That's the first thing. The second thing is expanding the global reach. The G7 has come together, but we need India, we need Indonesia, we need Brazil, we need the global South to get connected with a process that started in the global North. And we need to look at all of the layers of the technology stack. What does that mean? It means you're not only talking about foundation models, you're talking about the applications that use AI, you're talking about the AI infrastructure, you're talking about how you put safety controls in the right place for the right issue. So I think that will all begin to happen this year.
How do you do that when the data set that is being inputted in is only 1% coming in from India, and the supply of microprocessors to a country as large as India is only 1%? How does India then have an equal voice on that table, right, which is kind of deciding some of these things? How do you make it more equitable? Otherwise, we're just sort of enforcing the current hierarchy that exists.
I think that there is a voice that can be used and a voice that needs to be heard from India that is more of a reflection of India's role in the world based on its share of the world's people than its share of the world's chips or its share of the world's data. I don't go anywhere in the world and hear governments say, I only want to listen to countries that are producing chips, for example. Ultimately, the most important resource in the world is people. India has more people. It is producing more engineers, more talented people every year, and it's doing it more than any other place in the world at this point. I don't worry about people not wanting to listen to India's voice. What we need to do is create the connections so that something that, say, has been confined to the G7 starts to expand in an organized, formal way, so that then India has the seat at the table that India and the people of India need and deserve.
Because the current large language models is either based from America or China. It's not really got a cultural context of India or appreciative of the many languages that we have. So that's a concern area, right? We want the data set to be more diverse. We also want to be able to have access to the chips so that we can do more development around AI.
And I think those are the kinds of developments we're going to see take flight as AI continues to evolve. The issues around a local data set are not unique to India. You go to Japan and you hear about it. You go to the Middle East, you hear about Arabic content, for example. So I think that people are recognizing that whether it's for the training of foundation models or the fine-tuning of these models for more specialized uses, there are real opportunities to make good use of additional language-based content, more culturally specific content. I also think that a huge part of this is not just the development of the models, but the deployment. And here I just think we're going to see this continuing acceleration of more data centers in India, data centers running on carbon-free energy because that's so important to our industry, more services. If you actually look at where are the startups that are harnessing the power of AI, where do we see the biggest opportunities for growth in new startups in fields that barely exist today? India is always at the top or near the top of that list. It's not just about where this technology is developed, it's where it's diffused, it's where it's implemented, it's where people use it. India has such an advantage in that space.
Brad, what are the key trends you're looking out for from the stable of Microsoft when it comes to AI this year? We're at the beginning of a new year. Of the various things that you're working on, what should our viewers expect? What are the new things you're going to throw out?
Well, I think 2023 was a year when some people started to use AI and more people talked about it, but many people were talking about it without using it. 2024, I think we're just going to have many more people using generative AI. If you look at a company like Microsoft, we're very focused on our co-pilots. Co-pilots for our productivity suite, our co-pilot for our security solution, our co-pilot for businesses and business applications. And to me, what I'm most excited about is as people start to use it, something that is ephemeral or theoretical suddenly becomes very practical and concrete. It has for me. As I use it more and more, I learn how to get the most out of it and get the benefit for myself. And when we start to do that, I think the whole conversation changes. The course of technology actually changes because you get a feedback loop going back into the software developers, into the startup community, where people find new uses. To me, the most magical thing of being at a company like Microsoft is it doesn't matter what we create, our customers always find multiple ways to use it that we never imagined. But that doesn't start until people are using it, and that is now starting.
Did you imagine that your technology would be used to create a co-pilot that had emotional intelligence? Something that is being created by, I think, Inflection called Pi, right? Which works on basically becoming a companion.
No, I did not. And I think we're in such early days of trying to learn about and think through how these co-pilots best support, serve, and interact with people. If there's one sort of principle that cuts throughout everything that we do, certainly at Microsoft, but I think at great companies like Inflection, we need to make sure that this technology serves people, that benefits people. We need to think hard early on about the impact on people. If there's one thing I find everywhere in the world, people say, I don't want to see the world make the mistake it made a decade ago with social media. Then you ask, well, what was that mistake? And people said, we just let the technology go without really thinking about its impact on people, without putting guardrails in place under the law or regulation. And we just sort of hoped for the best. And social media has brought us some great things, but it's also had an impact that no one imagined. And so I think it's very important as AI evolves that we're constantly asking ourselves, what is its impact? How do we keep to this true principle at the center of everything? This needs to help people have better lives. If it's not, then we should be asking, are we doing the right thing?
Should we ask about AI and jobs then? Because that's one of the biggest impacts that people are concerned about. Is AI going to lead to large-scale unemployment, or is it going to augment our lives, right?
I mean, just at the IMF, they put out a report saying 60% of the jobs, in the way the jobs are defined currently, will be impacted in some form by AI. 60% is 6 out of 10 people. That's a very big number.
Yes, and I think the key thing to think about is what does it mean to have a job be impacted? There's 3 kinds of impacts. An existing job may be replaced by technology. A new job may be created, or the nature of a job, the work that one does in a job may change. My job's been impacted, and I'm not saying that simply because I talk a lot about AI. It's because the way I do my work, I use AI to help me do my work. So it's been impacted. I would tell you, it's been impacted in a very positive way. And it's been impacted because I've had access to the technology and I've been able to learn how to use it.
Call centers, coding, so many jobs you simply don't need any longer.
Not necessarily.
Of much fewer people than you.
Maybe, yeah. There may be areas where there are fewer people, and the people who are there may have more interesting, stimulating jobs. They may be more productive, and if the economy works well, you would hope that would translate into higher pay. There are some jobs that are already being recruited for today that didn't exist when we were at Davos a year ago. Prompt engineering has become a new field that Davos 2 years ago, if you had said that, people would have said, what are you talking about? So, it will be a dynamic economy. That part is definitely clear. There will be a real need for people, if they are to benefit from the technology, to be able to have access to it and to have access to the skills needed to put the technology to work. All of that, I think, becomes very important. And I think it's very important that we do this in ways that create a very important feedback loop from people who have jobs to people who create the technology. That's one of the things that we've been very focused on at Microsoft, partnering with, say, organized labor and labor unions to listen to teachers, to learn from teachers, to listen and learn from people in call centers, in other occupations and professions, and there's so many, where AI will be used. If we can partner in new ways, I think that will help the people who have jobs, it will help the people who create the technology that will have an impact on jobs.
What are the safest jobs and which are the jobs most at risk?
I think the safest jobs are the jobs that really depend at the end of the day on human-to-human connections. Even if an AI tutor could teach a class, would anyone really want to send their kids to a school to be taught by a computer without a teacher? Does anyone really want to go to a hospital and not have an opportunity to meet and talk and be helped by a nurse? Just think about how important in so many fields human-to-human connectivity is. Things that you can think of where you might say, well, the human doesn't add that much value. They listen and type something in. You know, that's probably a job where a computer with, voice recognition can increasingly do the work. I will tell you, I think journalists are safe. Not in every respect, because computers, AI will help. But at the end of the day, think about the ingenuity, the creativity, the human-to-human interaction that goes into being a great journalist, what the two of you do. Just, I think, as people consider that more broadly, there are some fundamental lessons to be learned and can be applied.
I was at a session where Satya Nadella was being questioned by Professor Klaus Schwab, and one of the things Satya seemed very excited about was private tutors, like AI tutors. And we, during our New Year break, had some homework to do, and we were just running out of time and so many things to do. My 8-year-old child started using technology to solve it, and what scared me was that, is this taking away his ability to think? There's a chocolate factory. I had to make a chocolate factory. Imagine what it could be. Now, you want to stimulate his thinking. Now, explain, how does a AI tutor for a child help? I mean, I'm concerned as a parent about whether it's actually taking away his ability to think.
But I think that is the fundamental question for all of us, and we should stay focused on it. You can either use technology that helps you answer a question to ask the next question and think more, or you can use technology to think less. It can either make you smarter or make you lazier. Think about spell checking. When we use computers or phones today, our spelling is enhanced. Do you remember the correct spelling? I actually think more people do than don't. And that is an interesting insight to just think about.
You mentioned our jobs as journalists, and one of the things that we're concerned about is copyright, right? The fact that somebody can download all of Rahul's videos and his voice and his look and create something which is like him, but not him, right? What do we do with that copyright problem?
I think the copyright issue is one that we're all going to have to focus on and work through. And the interesting thing about copyright is that it has always required a balance between the interests of creators and the interest of the public in getting access to content. And throughout the last 200 years, new technologies have been developed, and they have created new copyright questions. We have a new technology, we have a new question. I think two things are clear. One is, we of course want and need content creators to be compensated. If they're not, then I would worry about the future. At the same time, we want the public to have access to content, and we don't want to see this create such a high price for that content that only the richest companies would be able to afford to get it to train AI models. We might be able to navigate that world at a company like Microsoft, but I don't think that's a good world. And so this is part of the conversation, like all of this. For the next 12 months, the next 5 years.
Last question. Professor Stuart Russell says he doesn't use ChatGPT. What would be your elevator pitch to him to say, use it?
Try it. To try it is to find that you can do things faster, but more importantly, for anybody who is curious in the world, the faster you can answer a question, the sooner you can ask the next question. It is a tool to advance and enhance human curiosity. That, I think, is something worth trying.
The highlight of this conversation really has been that a lot of things are being discussed about things that needed to be done. You're saying you're actually going to roll out in as less as 1 month from now. So that's useful, and hopefully it can spread around fast enough in time to prevent some of the misuse during the elections. Thank you so much. So much to learn for me, and I'm sure for Kali as well, from this conversation. We wish you all the best, Brad Smith. Thank you for your time.
As always, thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you.
Pure Wash Electronic Seat by Kohler.